Welcome into Hittin Hard with Jon Chuckery here on Locked On Sports Atlanta. Today on the show, more disappointing. John Collins or DeAndre Hunter. Nagy sounds like he's bitter, and Gray provides the stability I was looking for. It's all next. It's Hittin Hard with Jon Chuckery, Locked On Sports Atlanta.
This is Hittin Hard with Jon Chuckery, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta. And it starts now.
Hittin Hard is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. We ask you to head to YouTube.com, put Locked On Sports Atlanta into your search browser. When you get there, hit that subscribe button. Leave us a comment. We are free and available to download on all of your favorite podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your favorite podcast from. And then we are also available on Roku and Amazon Fire. Yes, we are on those platforms as well. And then follow me on my personal Twitter page at JMCH316. So I brought this up on my radio show last night, that who is the more disappointing player of John Collins and DeAndre Hunter this year? Neither guy has exactly had a stellar season. So when we look at John Collins, this is 4 consecutive years of of his points per game being less than the year before. He's down to 13.5 points per game. 4 years ago, he was a 21, almost 22 point per game scorer. He's down over 8 points per game from 4 years ago. His shooting percentage, his overall field goal percentage, is down 4 consecutive years. His three-point percentage is down 4 consecutive years, to the point where he is literally shooting below 26% on the season from 3. Now, the other thing about this too is his number of shots is decreased over the last 4 years. So the average amount of shots that he takes per game has been on a 4-year decline. But the number of three-point shots that he's taken has stayed exactly the same. So there's been no change in that, as his shot selection, as his number of shots has gone down. And hence he's not shooting the 3-ball well, and it's factoring in at a bigger percentage than in years past. His rebounding is about the same, but he's nowhere near the 22-point, 10-rebound kind of guy that we saw from years ago. And then let's flip it over to DeAndre Hunter, who, when he was coming out of college, was the best on-ball defender in all of America. That was his reputation. He was an outstanding defensive player at Virginia. He was the best defensive player coming out of Virginia. That was what his hallmark was. In fact, everybody was like, well, his defense will be fine. He's got to work on his offensive game. Well, listen to this number for defensive rating for the Atlanta Hawks. Of the Atlanta Hawks players with any regular minutes, DeAndre Hunter is 9th in defensive rating for the Atlanta Hawks. That's points allowed over 100 possessions, which is a better measurement than plus minus, because that factors everybody on the floor. He's 9th on the Hawks, just on the Hawks. The only guy worse than DeAndre Hunter from a defensive rating standpoint is Trae Young. In fact, the Hawks are a 115 defensive rating team. DeAndre Hunter is 118. Now, there is maybe some caveat to that he typically guards the best offensive player. But again, he doesn't guard Kevin Durant every single night, okay? But only DeAndre Hunter is a 118 defensive rating player. Trae Young is a 118.7. And that's the 2 lowest guys from a defensive rating standpoint. Capella, Okongwu, Jalen Johnson, Collins, Murray, Holiday, Griffin, Bogey, and then DeAndre Hunter and Trae Young. Here's what I'll say about DeAndre Hunter, okay? And this may not be very nice, but it is becoming true. He's becoming a glorified Kent Bazemore. He's a 15-5 player that plays good but not great defense, and he's going to cost a whole bunch of money. So obviously we've talked about John Collins, here recently about GMs are not picking up the phone because of that $25 million contract. Well, here's the reality of where, and I do think that DeAndre Hunter has been the most disappointing player because he's that whole baby Kawhi narrative and all that's way out the window at this point. Hunter is a guy who's making $9.9 million this year, okay? He goes in next year and he's almost a $21 million player. And in 3 years, he's a $25 million player. So it's $25 million. And if there's not really much change, it's a 15-5 guy who plays good but not spectacular defense. No one's going to confuse DeAndre Hunter for a first-team All-NBA defensive player. And the same things that have happened to John Collins about, the potential albatross around the neck of contracts. And I understand the cap will go up and all this kind of stuff. But still, if you're a $25 million player, shouldn't you be more than 15-5 a night? And that's why I think that Hunter is the more disappointing of the two. John has to rely on some things with his backcourt about facilitating him, and he's not taking as many shots as what he used to back in the days before Trae Young came along or when Trae Young was first a rookie. So I can explain away a little bit of that, but again, neither one of those guys has been really impressive this year. And when we talk about why this team is in some of the states that they're in, yeah, Trae's not shooting well. Yeah, Collins and DeAndre Hunter aren't having really good seasons. Capella's having a nice year for what he is. He's kind of been one of the glue guys, but we've had a number of those guys not playing together. AJ Griffin has been a nice surprise. We saw that he was selected to the Futures game yesterday, so he's going to be in the Futures game. But they haven't gotten as much production. Bogey's been out for a good part of the season. They just haven't got the production that they've needed out of some of their other guys. And there are several guys that are just not having their best season. And you combine the injuries and the lack of production and all the other things, and it's why the Hawks are a game below 500, and they're right in the same spot that they were last year. And they're staring down the gun barrel of, okay, is this road trip going to go good or is it not going to go good? Because they're 0-1 on this 5-game road trip. They pretty much have to split. And I do think that if they don't split, if they're like 1-4, 0-5, then what they do at the trade deadline is going to be more sellers. They're not going to add pieces at the trade deadline. They're going to look to move guys for whatever deals that they can get. Because, again, it doesn't make sense to go in the luxury tax for a team that's below 500. And then they come home, and it's Phoenix and the Knicks and the Cavs and all these really good teams that they're going to play. It's a mess. I keep saying this over and over. It's a mess for what the Atlanta Hawks are right now. It was supposed to be so much better, but guys hurt, guys not playing up to their ability. It's been, Nate McMillan hasn't exactly been a world beater as coach. All of these things have come together. And if they're still an 8, 9, 10 seed, whatever, they still find themselves in that play-in tournament. Brother, it's going to be a very interesting offseason to see what direction this franchise goes. Because I think that there's at some point got to be an honest conversation about the direction that this franchise is going. All right, I want to talk about my friends over at FanDuel. Listen, FanDuel is your locked-on betting sports partner. It's the number one sports book in America. If you're new to FanDuel, we've got a great deal for you. So when you sign up at FanDuel.com/lockedon, FanDuel.com/LOCKEDON, when you sign up there, we're going to get you $150 in free bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. So place your first $5 bet at FanDuel.com/lockedon. Sign up for the deal today, and you'll get $150 in free bets. FanDuel's got all of your favorite bets, money line, point spreads, player props, and you can even combine bets for a bigger chance with the same game parlay. It's a safe, secure, and super easy to use app. So listen, we're headed toward the Super Bowl. You can get in on the Super Bowl. You can get in on NHL, NBA, college basketball, whatever your proclivities are. But when you place that first $5 bet, you get $150 in free bets, win or lose, and we hope you win. Win or lose, you get $150 in free bets just simply by signing up at FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/LOCKEDON. Make every moment more with FanDuel. It's the official sports book of the NFL. So the Senior Bowl director, Jim Nagy, former NFL scout, and he took it all over for Phil Savage, right? Phil Savage, former Browns GM. He was the color guy for the Alabama radio broadcast for a long time. Now Jim Nagy runs the Senior Bowl. He had some interesting comments about one particular player who is not at the Senior Bowl, and that is Stetson Bennett, Georgia quarterback, two-time national champion. Here's one of the quotes that he had to say. Quote, this is from Jim Nagy. Quote, "I was working with Stetson's people. I thought it made a ton of sense for him. What he did in Athens was incredible, but Stetson with a chip on his shoulder is a different quarterback than he's going to want to be in the NFL. The NFL wants a backup that's going to be dependable, stable, and reliable, supportive of a starter with a low ego." Then he went on to say that, he could, with Getsy, I guess it is the Bears offensive coordinator, he could have impressed him or things like that. Okay. Here's everything wrong with Jim Nagy's statement. Okay. Do you think Stetson Bennett is looking at going to the NFL just to be a backup quarterback? Now, Jim Nagy's pegged him just as being and maybe he will be a backup. Maybe he won't play in the NFL. Maybe he'll fall on his face. Maybe he'll be a bust. But in his mind, I don't know Stetson Bennett, but I sat 20 inches from him, and I talked to him on air for an interview. I talked to him off air, and he's got that ultimate chip on his shoulder. Everything about being the Georgia quarterback, when he was told he couldn't do it, he couldn't succeed, everything negative that was thrown his way, he's overcome all of that. And he's a two-time national champion. So in what universe do you think that he is looking at being a backup quarterback? And the whole thing about, he could go with the Bears. Huh? He said, Jim Nagy said, the Bears backup quarterback situation is murky. You know why it's murky? Because for the last 2 years, when they've had Justin Fields, they've had as their backups Andy Dalton, Trevor Siemian, Nick Foles, guys like that. They've gone the old-timey and they've gone the old-timey veteran quarterback as their backup. Why would the Bears, to be honest with you, be interested in the quarterback room looking like third-year Justin Fields, who's still got a long way to learn about playing quarterback, and then you bring a rookie in? Like, what sense does that make? So that doesn't even make logical sense for what the Bears backup quarterback situation is. And that's why it's murky, because you have Andy Dalton and Trevor Siemian and Nick Foles and guys like that. That's why it's murky, because you got the old-time veteran backup quarterback. Trevor Siemian has made more starts in the NFL than Justin Fields has. You're not going to have a third-year guy and a rookie. Even Matt Ryan, okay, for the third pick of the draft, and he had, all the smarts and everything. They got Matt Schaub, who was a wily veteran, to back him up, and Chris Redman. Chris Redman was, that was his murky. Heck, that wasn't even murky. It was pitch black. But you had those guys at backup quarterback because you wanted the veteran. It wasn't until Matt became a veteran quarterback himself that you started to go with Kurt Benkert and guys like that for backup quarterbacks. Jim Nagy sounds like he's bitter. And he said, well, if he would have been here, he wouldn't have gotten in trouble. Stetson Bennett got picked up for public intoxication. Can I tell you, okay, there were 3,550 nights in Buckhead that I could have gotten picked up for public intoxication. And I probably should have. I probably escaped a few. I mean, with all due respect, this is no big deal that what happened. And again, he'll pay a fine and maybe do an hour of community service. So again, the idea mentally up here that Stetson is thinking about, well, gee, I'm just going to be happy if I get to the league. I'm just going to be happy if I get into the NFL. I'm just going to be happy if I get drafted. Stetson Bennett's not thinking that way. This kid's a two-time national champion. Why do you think he's a national championship quarterback? Of all the quarterbacks that are in the entire history of college football, why do you think that he's been a two-time national champion? How many quarterbacks have been two-time national champions over the whole entire history, 150 years, whatever, of college football? Tim Tebow was a two-time national champion, but how many guys outside of that? Stetson Bennett's not thinking about being a backup. And again, the reality is he may be a backup. He may be a bust. He may be a failure. He may be a guy who doesn't last in the league. He may be playing in 2 years in the USFL or the XFL. That's the reality of it. The NFL chews up and spits out quarterbacks all the time. That's been better than Stetson Bennett. But up here in his mind, he's not thinking about any of that kind of stuff. He's not thinking about just happy to be in the league. He's not thinking about just trying to be a backup. Stetson Bennett is going to fight, scratch, and claw for being a starter, and in any situation that he goes to, wherever he gets drafted, he's going to compete like crazy. He's going to take his ability and try to maximize it. And that's what Jim Nagy doesn't understand about all of this. That's what he's not understanding. Stetson doesn't have a P for a Valentine. Stetson's got a pumpkin for a Valentine. He's got a heart the size of a pumpkin. And that's how he's overcome everything. He's fought, he's scratched, he's clawed. When everybody told him that he couldn't be the quarterback, when the coaches didn't want him, when he was transferring around, even when he got the job, look, it was always, well, JT Daniels is coming back and he's going to be back, and then he'll just step right in for Stetson. Every step of the way that Stetson Bennett has been told he can't do all of this, he's come through. And I guess Jim Nagy's bitter. Maybe he's got bitter beer face for all of it. But the reason why Stetson has that chip, that's what's made him successful. That's what's made him the ultimate winner in college football. That's why Georgia was 29-1 with a guy that a lot of people looked at and said, you're winning with that guy? Yeah, they've got outstanding talent, and he's played really well. And he was a Heisman finalist this year. everybody said no, that he couldn't do all of this. Maybe Jim Nagy, again, is just a bitter guy because of not having Stetson there. I want to talk about my friends over at Built Bar. Listen, everybody's we going into the new year, right? New you, new me, new everybody, right? We're trying to get ourselves in a healthier state of mind, healthier shape, and things like that. Well, part of that comes with nutrition, right? So you're looking for a little pick-me-up, a little snack on the go, right? Low calorie, low sugar, low carb, but you want the high protein to go along with it, okay? Built.com has got you figured out with all of your choices. And they've got all of the great flavors: churro, peanut butter brownie, coconut almond. They're always coming out with their flavors of the month: cookies and cream, double chocolate. Whatever your favorite kind of flavors are, Built.com has got all of it. So head to Built.com today. Take a look at their wide, extensive menu of all their different products. Also, you might want to try to give a chance on the protein-infused marshmallow puffs. They've got a little different taste and texture than just your traditional protein bar. I know some people just can't wolf down a protein bar. Well, the marshmallow puffs are a different taste and texture. Maybe give that a try. So you head to Built.com today, put together your order, or now you can head to Walmart and Sam's Club. So you can pick up your favorite boxes of Built bars over at Walmart. You go in the pharmacy section, grab your box there. You head over to Sam's Club. You can run in and get a 13 bar box with all of their, kinds of different flavors that they've got there. So now you can go to Walmart and Sam's Club to get your fix on your Built bars. Or you can go the online route where you go to Built.com, put together your order, put them together today, order it today. Built Bar, they got the snacks that you want for high protein, low carb, low sugar, low calorie, but they're really delicious, and especially when you try the protein puffs. All right. The Falcons hired yesterday Jerry Gray, and he's a old-time veteran defensive coach. He's been around the NFL forever and a day. He was actually a pretty good player back in the 80s. I think he was drafted by the Rams in the mid 80s. Was a good player, and he's been a coach for 26 years. Okay. And he's been a DC, and we'll talk about the connection to Arthur Smith here in just a little bit. But Jerry Gray is the stability that I was looking for when the Falcons hired their defensive coordinator. So, Ryan Nielsen, he's never been a DC. He's never been a play caller. Yes, he was co-DC. But again, that's the same. I mean, I could have the same title. Okay. If you're not calling the plays and everything like that as the actual defensive coordinator, and you're just getting guys ready and things like that, that's not the same thing. Being either up in the booth or on the sidelines, calling the defensive plays as the game goes on is a whole different world, right? So Jerry Gray has been a defensive coordinator. In fact, he was a defensive coordinator for 8 years in a couple of different stops for the Bills, for the Titans. So he's had some success in the league, and he's been a coach for 26 years. And his relationship goes back to Arthur Smith in 07 and 08 when they both worked together for the Redskins. I know it's the Commodores now, but they were the Redskins back then. So they have a relationship, and he knows what he's getting. And it is interesting that he named Jerry Gray assistant head coach. I don't think that needs to be lost on the title of what Jerry Gray is. He's your defensive backs coach. That's what his primary role is going to be. But he's also your assistant head coach. He's going to help out Nielsen in trying to figure out play calling and different things like that. He'll work directly with Arthur Smith on a lot of things. It is interesting that Jerry Gray is that, he's that stability, that stable force behind the scenes that I was looking for in the defensive coordinator. Now, there's one other thing about Jerry Gray that I want to point out, okay? In 2010, he was hired by the Seattle Seahawks to be the defensive backs coach, okay? Just coincidentally, that was the rookie year of Earl Thomas and Cam Chancellor. Okay? It's not coincidence that those two terrific players, got coached up by a guy with a lot of experience. And Jerry Gray has been mostly defensive backs coach last few seasons. He's been with Minnesota. He's been with Green Bay. Green Bay took, what was it? They took Stokes out of Georgia in the first round. He's worked with some of the best. But it is interesting that they brought Jerry Gray in to work with their two rookie safeties. How'd that turn out for Earl Thomas and Cam Chancellor? Now, I'm not trying to compare Richie Grant and Jalen Hawkins, but I don't think it's just pure coincidence and just random happenstance that they bring Jerry Gray in to coach those guys up and maybe hopefully get them on that next step forward. So just want to point that out, that in 2010, he coached those two rookie safeties. It wasn't Dan Quinn. Dan was down in Gainesville, Florida, when all that was happening, and they were drafting Sherman and all those guys. He was down in Gainesville, Florida. Jerry Gray was the guy coaching those guys, right? Jerry Gray was there in Seattle. Dan was waving from Gainesville, Florida, and would eventually come up and be the DC and everything like that. And obviously he took it over after Gus Bradley. Can you tell I don't really like Dan Quinn as a coach? But anyway, so but Jerry Gray really is a good football coach. And I don't think that it's just random happenstance that they wanted to give him the title of assistant head coach. He's a lifer in the NFL. He's a player. He was a coach for 26 years. He's one of these guys that are lifers. I really like this hire. And when I look at, okay, the weaknesses or the lack of experience for Ryan Nielsen gets taken over by Jerry Gray, right? Ryan Nielsen's a guy who hasn't been a DC. He hasn't had to call the plays and things like that. He's only been a co-DC and all that good stuff. Jerry Gray is a guy who can come in here and work with him. And I like the hire that you have this lifer who kind of is like, he's not coached as long as Dean Pease, but I like some of these lifers that are going to be on our coaching staff, because at the end of the day, our roster is really young and it's not very good. And there's a lot of guys that have to be coached up. Whatever our other cornerback is going to be, Jerry's going to be the perfect guy to work with those safeties and defensive backs. And he's going to be a big influence and a good mentor for Ryan Nielsen for his first time being a DC. All of this is good stuff for the Atlanta Falcons, and they're getting their coaching staff really in pretty good position. All right, I want to thank you so much for making Hittin' Hard with Jon Chuckery your first listen. Make sure you make Locked On Sports Today your second listen. Biggest stories of the day, instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. You can find them on Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your favorite podcast from. We ask you to head over to youtube.com and put Locked On Sports Atlanta into your search browser. When you get there, hit that subscribe button, leave us a comment. We are free and available to download on all of your favorite podcast platforms. So whether it's Spotify, Apple, whatever your favorites are, download it today. Listen to us when you're on the go. Roku and Amazon Fire, we are available there as well. Check us out there on those platforms. And then give me a follow on my personal Twitter page at JMCH316. Back with you tomorrow. This has been Hittin' Hard with Jon Chuckery, Locked On Sports Atlanta.